The most dangerous shift in the Red Sea may no longer be at sea. It may now be moving directly towards Saudi oil infrastructure. According to Houthi statements, the group has launched missiles and drones toward targets linked to Saudi Aramco in Yanbu and Jizan. The same movement has also claimed attacks on 2 Saudi oil tankers. It has threatened what it describes as a blockade against vessels connected to Riyadh. Some reports have pointed to smoke or possible damage at oil facilities. But the full extent of any impact remains unclear. Independent verification is still limited. That uncertainty is important, because in this kind of confrontation, the first battle is often over facts. The second battle is over deterrence. And the larger strategic question begins immediately after that. If the Houthis are now expanding pressure from shipping lanes to Saudi energy facilities, what exactly changes? Does this remain a contained pressure campaign from Yemen? Or does it become the opening stage of a broader regional test involving Saudi Arabia, maritime trade, and global energy markets? That is the real issue. This is not only about one missile launch, one drone strike, or one refinery alarm. It is about whether the battlefield is widening in a way that raises the cost for every actor involved. For years, the Red Sea and Yemen were treated as connected, but still partially separate problems. One was a naval security challenge. The other was a grinding regional war. Now those two fronts may be converging more directly. And when those fronts converge, the pressure no longer stays near the coast of Yemen. It reaches Saudi ports, export routes, insurance markets, and the calculations of outside powers. To understand why this matters, we first need to examine the targets themselves. Yanbu is not just another city on Saudi Arabia's western coast. It is one of the kingdom's most important energy and industrial centers. Located on the Red Sea, it serves as a refining, petrochemical, and export hub. Its position is strategically valuable because it supports energy flows away from the Persian Gulf that matters in any regional crisis. A facility on the Gulf side can be threatened by one set of risks. A facility on the Red Sea side can be threatened by another. Together, they form part of the wider resilience of Saudi energy infrastructure. Jizan matters for different reasons. It sits much closer to Yemen. Its location puts it nearer to the line of pressure created by Houthi missile and drone activity. That geographic proximity changes the defense problem. A target near the border faces different warning times, different flight profiles, and different interception challenges. What looks secure on a map can become vulnerable in practice. This is especially true when the attacking side does not rely on conventional air power. The Houthis do not need fighter jets to generate strategic pressure. They rely on a different model. That model combines missiles, drones, mobility, political messaging, and repeated attempts to impose cost over time. It is a strategy built around persistence rather than outright battlefield dominance. The group has spent years developing an ability to threaten Saudi territory. Sometimes those threats produced visible damage. At other times, the attacks were intercepted, disrupted, or had only limited effect. But the central military lesson remained the same. A non-state actor with access to missiles and drones can force a much stronger state into a constant defensive posture. That is one of the most important asymmetries in this conflict. The attacker may spend relatively little on each strike package. The defender may spend far more trying to stop it. A drone can be cheap. The missile needed to intercept that drone may be far more expensive. And the problem is not only financial, it is operational. Defenders must remain alert every day. Attackers need only find a few moments of opportunity. That imbalance does not automatically decide the conflict, but it changes how pressure accumulates. It also explains why attacks on infrastructure carry a different weight than attacks on military positions alone. An attack on a base sends one signal. An attack on oil infrastructure sends several signals at once. It speaks to the target state. It speaks to the global market. And it speaks to every outside government trying to assess whether the crisis is still limited. That is why claims involving Saudi Aramco facilities immediately attract attention far beyond Yemen. Aramco is not just a company. It is tied to the energy stability of one of the world's most important oil producers. Even when physical damage is limited, the psychological and market effect can still be significant. This is where the situation becomes more dangerous. A strike does not need to destroy a major facility to alter regional calculations. It only needs to prove that the facility can be reached. In modern conflict, vulnerability can matter almost as much as destruction. If the Houthis can repeatedly demonstrate reach into Yanbu or Jizan, they create a new kind of pressure. Saudi Arabia then faces a difficult choice. It can absorb the attacks and emphasize defense. It can intensify military retaliation. Or it can attempt a more complex combination of restraint, interception, and selective response. Each of those options carries costs. Restraint may invite further attacks. Escalation may widen the war. And a middle course can be hard to sustain if strikes continue. This is why location matters so much. Yanbu sits on the Red Sea side of the kingdom. That gives it strategic importance beyond its industrial role. Saudi Arabia has long understood the risk of overdependence on a single coastal orientation. Infrastructure on the western side offers alternative pathways and strategic depth. But that depth is only useful if it remains reasonably secure. If Red Sea energy infrastructure becomes an active target set, the geographic balance starts to shift. That does not mean Saudi exports suddenly stop. It means planners must now think more seriously about a threat environment affecting multiple directions. The Houthis understand this logic. They do not need to match Saudi Arabia platform for platform. They only need to threaten enough critical points to force Riyadh into a wider defensive burden. That is how weaker actors often compete against stronger states. They avoid the strongest point. They search for the most politically sensitive or economically relevant target. Then they return to that pressure point repeatedly. But reaching a target and destroying it are not the same thing. That brings us to the next question. How could such attacks actually be attempted? The answer begins with the weapon mix. The Houthis have relied on various combinations of drones and missiles. Drones can be used for reconnaissance, decoy activity, or direct attack. Some are designed to fly low and reduce detection time. Missiles create a different challenge. They can arrive faster. They can force quicker decisions. And they can saturate defenses if used alongside drones. This combination is tactically significant. A layered defense system is strongest when it sees clearly, prioritizes effectively, and engages in sequence. A mixed drone and missile attack tries to disrupt that sequence. It forces radars, command centers, and interceptor crews to sort real threats from possible decoys. It compresses time. It complicates tracking. And in some cases, it seeks less to destroy than to create confusion. That confusion can be strategically useful. Even a failed strike can reveal how the defender responds. How quickly are air defenses activated? Which sites appear most protected? Where do interceptions occur? How long do emergency procedures take? A probing attack can become an intelligence exercise. That is another reason these incidents matter. They are not isolated from the broader military contest. They may help shape later attacks. Saudi Arabia is not defenseless in this environment. Far from it. The kingdom has invested heavily in air and missile defense. It has experience facing cross-border threats. Its defenses have been reinforced by lessons learned from past attacks on oil infrastructure and urban targets. It also benefits from broader partnerships, intelligence cooperation, and regional monitoring. But air defense is never perfect. No country can guarantee a complete shield against every drone and missile in every direction. That is especially true when the attack profile is adaptive. The defender must protect large areas. The attacker can choose moments, routes, and target priorities. There is another challenge as well. Critical infrastructure is fixed. Launch teams are often mobile. A refinery, terminal, or storage site cannot relocate overnight. A drone launcher can. A missile team can disperse. A support network can hide within rugged terrain or urban clutter. That creates an enduring contrast. The state protects fixed assets. The irregular actor operates from a moving threat network. On paper, Saudi defenses may appear stronger. In practice, the burden remains constant. This helps explain why the Houthis have focused so much on symbolic and strategic targeting. They are trying to show that geography does not guarantee safety. And if that message begins to take hold, the political value of each new attack increases. That is why claims against Yanbu and Jizan deserve careful attention, even when verified damage remains uncertain. The military effect may be limited. The signaling effect may not be. At the same time, the Houthis are also linking these attacks to maritime pressure. That connection is not accidental. Earlier claims about attacks on 2 Saudi tankers and efforts to impose a blockade against ships tied to Riyadh point to a wider strategy. The group is trying to merge the land war, the air threat, and the shipping threat into one pressure campaign. That has serious implications. A tanker is not just a commercial vessel. It is part of a logistics chain. Interfere with enough links in that chain, and the cost spreads outward. Shipping companies respond. Insurers respond. Naval planners respond. Oil traders respond. And governments begin asking whether this is still a localized conflict. This is where a conflict around Yemen starts affecting the wider Red Sea system. The Red Sea is not only a body of water between coasts. It is a strategic corridor. Commercial traffic passing through the Bab el-Mandeb connects the Indian Ocean to the Suez Route and the Mediterranean. Disruption there can ripple into global supply chains. That does not mean every threat closes the route, but repeated threats can raise insurance premiums, slow transit decisions, and force more guarded movement. The economic damage can begin before a major physical disruption occurs. This is another asymmetry. The Houthis do not need to stop all shipping. They only need to make safe passage, feel less certain. That uncertainty is a weapon in itself. Saudi Arabia, in turn, cannot think only in terms of retaliating against one launch site. It must think in terms of protecting energy assets, ports, and broader confidence in transit routes. That expands the strategic burden. And the wider the burden grows, the more outside actors become involved. The United States watches these developments closely for several reasons. One is maritime security. Washington has long treated freedom of navigation in regional choke points as a major strategic interest. Another is the protection of partners and critical infrastructure. A third is the risk of miscalculation. The Red Sea, Gulf approaches, and Arabian Peninsula are all areas where an attack meant as signaling can trigger a larger response. American involvement does not need to begin with direct strikes. It can begin with intelligence sharing, surveillance, interception support, logistics, or naval escort operations. Even those measures, however, can change the conflict environment. The Houthis may interpret outside support as part of the battlefield. That can influence their targeting logic. Saudi Arabia therefore faces not only a military problem, but also a signaling problem. How strongly should it react? How publicly should it react? And how does it deter without feeding a larger cycle of escalation? These are difficult decisions because the military picture and the political picture are connected. A tactically successful interception may not restore deterrence. A limited retaliatory strike may not stop future launches. And a large retaliation may create wider diplomatic and security consequences. This is where the difference between tactical success and strategic success becomes essential. If Saudi air defenses intercept most incoming threats, that is a tactical success. If oil exports continue with only temporary disruption, that may look like an operational success. But if the Houthis can still sustain the image of vulnerability, Saudi Arabia may still face a strategic problem. The same logic applies on the other side. If the Houthis reach a target but cause little damage, they gain a symbolic victory. That is not the same as a decisive military success. They would still need to convert visibility into lasting leverage. Whether they can do that depends on repetition, resilience, and the reactions of larger states. The next layer of the problem concerns attack planning. For an operation against Saudi energy infrastructure to have meaningful effect, the attackers must solve several practical challenges. They need reliable targeting information. They need a launch path that reduces early detection. They may seek timing that coincides with distraction, poor weather, or other regional tensions. They may also try to combine multiple systems to complicate the defense picture. That does not guarantee success, but it improves the chance of forcing difficult defensive decisions. A strike package might include decoy drones. It might include one-way attack drones intended to exhaust attention and interceptors. It might also include faster missiles aimed at high-value points. The goal might not be to destroy an entire complex. It could be to hit a storage area, disrupt operations, or demonstrate penetrability. That would be enough to create headlines and strategic debate. The first attack is often the easiest part. The harder question is what happens afterward. If Saudi Arabia believes the threat is expanding, it may intensify preemptive or retaliatory military action. That can mean strikes against launch areas, logistics, nodes, storage sites, or command elements. But that path carries uncertainty. Mobile launch systems can be difficult to locate. Intelligence can age quickly. And the defender on the ground often adapts after each wave. This is another structural challenge. Air power can punish. It cannot always permanently suppress a dispersed launch network. That is one reason conflicts like this can become wars of pressure rather than wars of rapid decision. The Houthis may not need to win a conventional campaign. They may only need to keep launching often enough to preserve relevance and leverage. The defender, meanwhile, must maintain readiness continuously. That is exhausting over time. It consumes interceptors. It strains personnel. It requires maintenance, radar coverage, and alert discipline. And because the Red Sea theater overlaps with wider regional tensions, there is always the risk that one front amplifies another. This is where the Saudi response becomes strategically important. Riyadh has reasons to avoid uncontrolled escalation. It also has reasons to show that attacks on core energy infrastructure carry consequences. Balancing those two aims is difficult. If the response is too light, deterrence may weaken. If the response is too heavy, the conflict may expand in ways that benefit the attacker politically. That political dimension should not be underestimated. The Houthis often use military action for both battlefield and narrative purposes. A strike claim can shape regional perception even before damage is confirmed. That is why public messaging matters so much in parallel with military operations. One side emphasizes resilience and defense. The other emphasizes reach and defiance. Observers then try to interpret which story is more credible. The fog of war makes that even harder. Some reports may point to smoke. Others may report interception. Officials may confirm an incident while minimizing damage. Analysts may caution that the full picture remains incomplete. This uncertainty is not unusual, but it has consequences. Markets dislike uncertainty. Shipping companies dislike uncertainty. And military planners treat uncertainty as risk. That is why even limited incidents can have outsized effects. A single successful hit on a visibly important facility can reverberate far beyond the physical blast area. It can cause questions about redundancy, repair speed, and future vulnerability. It can trigger fresh assessments of shipping lanes. It can raise pressure on governments to act. And it can embolden copycat or follow-on attacks. The risk is magnified by geography. Jizan lies close enough to Yemen that the warning time for some threats may be relatively compressed. Shorter warning windows place more stress on point defenses and local command systems. Yanbu is farther away, but its symbolic importance is higher in different ways. A threat reaching Yanbu suggests broader reach. It implies that the threat envelope is not limited to immediate border zones. That is psychologically significant. It forces defenders to think in larger circles. It also tells outside observers that the conflict cannot be assessed only by looking at the frontier. This brings us to the wider regional picture. A campaign against Saudi oil sites and Saudi-linked shipping does not remain isolated from the rest of the Middle East. Other Gulf states will watch closely. They may review air defense posture. They may coordinate more actively on surveillance and warning. They may adjust the security of ports, pipelines, and energy facilities. Even if they are not directly targeted, they are part of the same security ecosystem. The United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Qatar, and Kuwait all understand that infrastructure warfare can spread pressure without formal declarations. The same is true for maritime operators moving through adjacent routes. There is also the broader question of Iranian support. Many governments and analysts have long argued that the Houthis benefit from Iranian assistance, especially in missile and drone technology. Tehran, however, calibrates its posture carefully and often avoids direct responsibility for every action by regional partners. That ambiguity matters. It gives room for political deniability. It also complicates deterrence. If Saudi Arabia or its partners believe the threat has an external sponsor, pressure may build for responses that reach beyond Yemen. That would make the situation much more dangerous. Yet direct escalation against a larger regional power also carries immense risks. This is why states often hesitate at the edge of wider conflict. They want deterrence. They want security. But they also want to avoid the war that might follow. This tension can produce limited responses, indirect pressure, and prolonged shadow conflict. Such a pattern may be exactly what weaker actors hope to exploit. They cannot defeat a stronger coalition in open battle, but they can complicate its choices. They can raise the cost of every decision, and they can search for moments when symbolic action produces disproportionate anxiety. The economic dimension then becomes impossible to ignore. Oil markets do not wait for final battle damage assessments. They respond to risk, expectation, and uncertainty. If traders believe attacks on Red Sea energy infrastructure could continue, price volatility can increase. Even if production remains largely stable, the perception of instability can still matter. Shipping insurance is another pressure point. Repeated threats raise costs. Higher costs alter routes, schedules, and cargo calculations. A blockade claim does not have to be universally effective to create commercial friction. Some operators may delay, some may demand extra protection, some may reroute based on worst-case assumptions. That makes the conflict economically efficient for the attacker. A relatively small strike effort can impose a larger defensive and commercial cost on others. This is the familiar cheap attack, expensive defense problem. It has become a defining feature of modern regional conflict. The defenders can intercept, they can escort, they can patrol, they can harden infrastructure. But all of those steps require sustained resources. And if the threat continues, the expense accumulates. That accumulation can become strategic. The Houthis do not need to close an entire sea lane permanently. They only need to prove that keeping it open safely is costly. Saudi Arabia, for its part, must consider not just the direct threat to infrastructure, but also the durability of its defense model. Can it sustain high interceptor usage over time? Can it protect both cities and energy sites without creating exposure elsewhere? Can it maintain calm in the market while also projecting resolve? Those are not simple questions. They involve logistics as much as tactics. Interceptors must be stocked. Radars must be maintained. Repair teams must be ready. Emergency procedures must function under pressure. And intelligence about launch areas must stay current. A conflict like this is not only about launch and interception. It is also about endurance. This is where the longer campaign picture becomes important. If the Houthis are truly widening the target set, they may be testing whether Saudi Arabia can be pulled into a more reactive posture. A reactive posture is strategically costly. It means the defender is always preparing for the next strike. It means political leaders are responding to events rather than shaping them. And it means pressure may build even without decisive battlefield change. Still, the picture is not one-sided. The Houthis face limitations too. They operate under intense surveillance pressure. Launch assets can be found and destroyed. Logistics lines can be disrupted. Stockpiles are not unlimited. And repeated attacks increase the chance of retaliation against key nodes. This is why sustained pressure campaigns are difficult to maintain indefinitely. Symbolism can be renewed. Capability is harder to replace. A second limitation is that not every claimed strike produces meaningful strategic effect. If attacks are repeatedly intercepted, or if damage remains minimal, the deterrent image may weaken. The group then has to escalate frequency, range, or target importance to maintain pressure. That creates its own risks. It can provoke stronger responses. It can overextend the network, and it can invite more external involvement. This leaves the conflict at a dangerous midpoint. Neither side may want total war. Neither side may feel able to accept repeated attacks without response. That combination often produces cycles of action and counteraction. and those cycles can become harder to control with each round. So what happens next? There are at least three broad possibilities. The first is a limited containment scenario. In that case, Saudi defenses hold reasonably well. Damage remains limited. Retaliatory measures are calibrated. Shipping disruption continues at a manageable level. The crisis remains dangerous, but contained. That would be the most stable outcome available under current conditions. The second possibility is a sustained pressure scenario. Under that path, attacks continue intermittently against shipping and energy infrastructure. Most strikes may not be decisive, but over time, they raise costs, strain defenses, and keep markets unsettled. This is a war of persistence. Its goal is not rapid victory. Its goal is accumulated pressure. Such a scenario may be the most realistic if neither side wants full escalation, but neither side can restore deterrence. The third possibility is the most serious. A strike causes notable damage, or a retaliation crosses an important threshold. Regional actors then respond more forcefully. Outside powers become more directly involved. Maritime escorts become more militarized. Air defense networks are expanded. Cross-border strikes intensify. At that point, the original incident would no longer be the center of the story. It would simply be the trigger. That is what makes this moment so significant. The immediate issue is whether missiles or drones reach Saudi-linked targets. The larger issue is whether the Red Sea conflict is evolving into a broader infrastructure war. If that happens, the implications go well beyond Yemen. They reach into the energy security of the Gulf. They reach into the commercial lifelines of the Red Sea. And they reach into the strategic calculations of the United States and its partners. This is why confirmation matters. It is also why caution matters. Claims by one side should not be treated as final proof. Official reassurances should not automatically be treated as the complete picture either. In fast-moving conflicts, both overstatement and understatement are common. Serious analysis depends on separating what is known from what is claimed. At this stage, several things appear clear. The Houthis want to demonstrate expanding reach. They want pressure on Saudi Arabia through both maritime and infrastructure channels. And they want that pressure to carry political and economic weight beyond the battlefield. What remains less clear is the extent of actual damage, the sustainability of the attack tempo, and the threshold that would trigger a major Saudi or external escalation. Those unanswered questions now matter more than the first headlines. Because the real significance of this episode lies not only in what happened, it lies in what may now be considered possible. A state can protect key infrastructure for years and still face sudden vulnerability. An armed movement with limited conventional power can still threaten systems that matter globally. And a conflict that appears localized can still widen through trade, energy, and deterrence failures. That is the strategic paradox at the center of this crisis. The attackers do not need overwhelming power to alter regional behavior. They only need enough reach to create uncertainty. The defenders do not need to lose control completely to face a strategic setback. They only need to appear unable to guarantee security. This is why even a modest attack can be strategically important. It changes assumptions. It forces recalculation. And it tests whether the stronger side can convert superior resources into durable deterrence. Saudi Arabia may be able to protect most of its core infrastructure. It may be able to absorb limited attacks and recover quickly. But protecting facilities and controlling the escalation ladder are two different missions. The first depends on defenses, repair, and readiness. The second depends on political restraint, strategic signaling, and the behavior of multiple actors beyond Riyadh's direct control. The same applies to the Houthis. They may be able to launch more attacks. That does not mean they can control the consequences. A campaign designed to impose pressure can still trigger responses larger than expected. That is often the hidden danger in infrastructure warfare. The blast is local. The consequences are regional. The target may be an oil site in Yanbu or Jizan. The effects may extend to shipping routes, military planning rooms, and energy markets across continents. So the question is no longer whether the Houthis can threaten Saudi-linked targets. The evidence suggests they are determined to try. The deeper question is whether those attempts will remain part of a contained pressure campaign, or whether they mark the beginning of a more dangerous phase in which Saudi energy infrastructure, Red Sea shipping, and regional deterrence are all drawn into the same widening contest. The first strike may last only minutes. The strategic consequences could unfold for much longer.